Hi, everyone. Today I'm sitting here with Patrick Edmonds. Patrick, he is the CMO at the company Proposify. Proposify is a better way to create, send, track, and e-sign winning proposals, contracts, and agreements. I'm super excited to have Patrick on board today as he is a very experienced CMO and he's agreed to touch upon and be very honest about, you can say, what kind of growth initiatives and what kind of things that work at Proposify. I'm very honored to have you here today, Patrick. Please say hi to the audience.
Hey, everybody, and thanks for having me, Nikki.
You're most welcome, Patrick. So let us start off the question by asking being a CMO or being in a marketing role in a company and within, I would say Proposify is very much a scale up, right? You have reached a certain stage where you have a lot of users and a lot of clients. How has your kind of role transitioned in Proposify during the years that you've been there?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been at the company a little over 4 years, which seems like a long time for in a lot of startup to scale up space, and very lucky for that. But with that, I've seen a lot of changes. When I started, we were about 10 people. Now we're at around 90, and our revenue was, I think, just hitting about a million ARR, and now we're closer to 8 or 9. And lots of things have changed, and even the revenue models have changed. The business model has changed. A lot has changed. The core product is evolved and become a lot better. And so, excited to dig into anything you want to see there. But we've seen it go from a 100% self-serve business as well to having a sales touch model, balancing the self-serve with the sales touch. Lots of changes in terms of where our revenue comes from, what our customers look like, target persona is changing. So happy to jump into any of that.
Yeah, there's one point there that's very interesting to me, and just before we kind of dig into it, I just want to say hi to the people who is listening in live here. Hi everyone, thank you for showing up, and please ask questions if you have any questions, or maybe just say hi in the comments. We would be happy to kind of know that there's people listening in live. That's a cool thing. So Patrick, you talked about kind of having this self-serve model, and then basically also, as I heard it at least, layering a sales team on top of it, or an outbound kind of model afterwards. And what I kind of see from the trends in, you can say, SaaS and really like software products, is that they try to get to a self-service model, this kind of product-led growth kind of way. And then they basically want to shut off their sales team. How come you moved the opposite way?
Yeah, it definitely can go both directions. I've seen, if you start more enterprise and you're 100% sales led, then it looks very attractive for that to be automated as much as you possibly can. And we start on the other end of that, where everything was self-serve and automated from that perspective. And lots of that still happens too. We are more of a hybrid than we are one or the other at this point. But I think it really depends on who your core customer is and what revenue makes the most sense in terms of your revenue model, what's more scalable long-term for customers and that sort of thing. So if you start on the enterprise side and you've got large contract values, you may only have a handful of customers. And if you lose one of those, a big chunk of your revenue is going to be gone. And they want to diversify a little bit. They want to spread it out. They'd rather have a few hundred or thousands of customers to spread that out. And that seems really attractive. And from our perspective, we had and still have thousands, over 10,000 customers. And what became a little bit more attractive for us was like, if we could just get a little bit bigger, if we could get our average contract value just to this level or to this level, it made scale seem that much, made the math seem to make more sense in terms of what we could do. And it just made sense in terms of what we were seeing. And this may be the case for some companies that start on the self-serve and move to enterprise and not, where the user behavior might be a little bit different. Someone who's looking for just a quick win or an inexpensive tool, I think very generally, you'll see that the churn rate for those customers is going to be higher. If they're only spending $20 a month, $10 a month on a piece of software, it's like, oh, it's nice to have, it's cool, but they didn't they didn't spend the time of thinking, oh, I'm going to invest thousands of dollars in this. So the mental space that you were in is a little bit different from that perspective, just as a customer. And so you'll see on average, great to have thousands of customers coming in, but more of a percentage of them that might not stick around, either because it didn't fit within their revenue model. And that seemed to be the case for us, where we're a sales tool. And some of the people that we were selling to loved it, but they weren't selling 12 months of the year. They were only selling 1 quarter at a time. And then they were the president or CEO of that company. Then they were doing the fulfillment. And so they were paying for software on a monthly basis, but they were only using it a few months of the year. And so they liked it. It wasn't a product problem. It was a business fit problem for us. And so what made more sense is to go after organizations that were always selling. They had no bottlenecks in selling. They had they were established sales organizations with a VP of sales, a leader in that space. And they would get the value all year long of using that tool and that software, and I'd ideally still get the benefit out of it. So for us, it was more so not just we wanted higher contract values, but we wanted a more sustainable model where we were serving our customer and they were getting value 12 months of the year, not just a few months of the year. And that was really what pushed us to look at a different customer base and kind of move in that direction.
Cool. There's many things that's making me curious here, and that's very interesting to me. One of the things that you just mentioned was this thing about, okay, so one thing is kind of having this sales-led model, kind of transitioning into a more sales-led model in, you can say, the enterprise segment here, because you can say we expect that the lifetime value may be higher because they are enterprise customers or maybe just large companies who will buy a higher tier of our product, right? And kind of what was interesting here is that, so even though that we create this sales-led model, we also have to be cautious of what kind of audience are we then targeting with our very expensive sales team, right? Because it is quite expensive to kind of run a sales team, and typically what we also see is that it takes time for it to generate positive return on investment, right? Yeah, have you seen the same thing? Yeah,
absolutely. Yes, the marketing kind of tactics and strategy that go along with a sales-led model look very, very different, and that's why I think it keeps us very interested in our jobs day to day, because we do have that experience of the self-serve model, and there's a lot of benefits that can still go in there, but we've continually had to adapt and learn as to how does a marketing team support a sales organization. And when I first started, like I said, no sales team. So the marketing team made up the majority of that revenue creation within the organization. Everything, a new customer came in, great job marketing, you brought in a new customer. And then when you bring in a sales team, it's like, okay, sales team brought in a new a larger lead. And then what's that balance of even just bodies in your organization, of how many marketers do you have on the team? How many salespeople do you have on the team? And now we're actually pretty even, which is different. An enterprise organization, sales absolutely has more bodies in the team. There's I don't know what the ratio would be, but you definitely have more sales human beings than you would have marketing human beings. And we'll probably get there. That's the direction that we're going. I don't think that our marketing team will scale at the same rate from a body seat perspective, human perspective, as the sales team will, because there's more of that one-to-one relationship to it. And I want our marketing team to become as efficient and effective at supporting sales as possible. There's a lot that we can learn from the automation that we've done before that could still be applied, so our team can be really, really effective moving that forward. But you're right, the tactics definitely change. So you start talking about things like target accounts and account-based marketing, where that doesn't make sense when you're doing large scale, thousands and thousands of customers, ABM. There's no ROI there. You're not going to mail all of your customers a custom letter or a t-shirt or whatever it is, some swag to every lead, because you're never going to make your money back. They're only paying you tens of dollars per month. And even going to conferences and events, our flights and hotels, this is pre-COVID, cost more than the ROI that we would get out of any lead or customer that we would get at those events. It was a brand building exercise more than anything, but the ROI of those activities made less and less sense when you're doing a self-service model, if you're trying to pinch every penny, where they make more sense when you have a contract value that's there, even with the sales salaries and technology on top of that. So yeah, those tactics completely shift and change. And now we're balancing both at the same time, which doesn't make it easier too. Sometimes I feel jealous of those teams that are just a little bit more hyper focused, but at the same time excited to be doing both.
Yeah, and kind of, so it is no what can we say? People who are listening into this to this show, they are from, you can say, just getting started in growth to quite experienced growth professional, advanced growth marketeers or strategies or whatever we can call it, marketeers as well. And kind of like, when do you start? What would be kind of the elements that would have to be in place for a company to transition into this kind of going from what can we call it, product-led growth kind of model into a more sales-led model, and kind of going, you can say, enterprise with a specific segment? Do you have any tips, or what do we have to look for to kind of identify if that would be something that we should try to focus and prioritize? Because everything in marketing is prioritization, right?
Yeah,
it's difficult.
Yeah. Yes, no, absolutely. And I'm not going to say that we've perfectly figured it out either, but I definitely can share some of the learning lessons that came along with that. The first bottleneck that we came to was we had a healthy inbound just by nature of a product-led model, and it was very organic search driven. Lots of inbound leads, starting free trials of our software. That's where the majority of our leads came from, and actually still does today. The problem with that is you have a BD, even an inbound BDR, SDR kind of sales world here in our organization. And if we would send them hundreds of leads per day. And I say leads in quotations because they're not all necessarily good fit customers. And there's a lot of manual work that had to go in there for that person to sort through that list, and prioritization of the sales team's time, not even necessarily prioritization of marketing team's tasks. So first thing we had to do, put in lead scoring or some sort of prioritization just within leads in terms of data enrichment for those to figure out, okay, who makes sense for the sales team to spend their time and effort on, because like you said, they're more expensive. It's a human being figuring this out. It's not an automated email sequence. So you can't just send everyone over. They want to do hyper-personalized emails and calls, like literal phone calls. And so there's only so many hours in a day to do those sorts of things. So we had to create the mechanisms for that marketing to sales handoff. It's pretty traditional in enterprise where you have to be able to do that, but we had never done it before, and we had to kind of figure all that out.
Yeah. Just one question, Patrick. So people often underestimate how long time it takes to set something like that in place.
Yes.
Can you please share just a little bit more about that?
Because, like I said, it's not perfect. I'd say it's never done either.
Yeah.
But to get it from like nothing to something, it took at least 6 months, honestly, maybe more than that. And at that time that was just a fundamental version of like, okay, we can do some level of prioritization, and they're not just going into the leads aren't going to the abyss, which is great. And we're not just sending 100% of the people through. We had to adopt new technologies. Sales team comes with like bringing a CRM on and integrating the marketing data with the sales data. It's a lot more work than you would think it. And then it's never done at that point because it's never perfect. It's never right. Whatever algorithm you write to try and score leads, or whatever data point that you're using to try and prioritize on, is never going to stay perfect or right. People change, the personas change, the audience change, even just what you're doing in marketing before that can affect who's coming through. So it's a continual discussion between sales and marketing to say, here's a good fit, here's a not good fit. Why did they get through? Why didn't they get through? So our sales and marketing operations teams are always talking about that and trying to make it better.
Yeah, cool. And there's people listening in live here. I just want to say hi again. Please let us know if you have any questions for Patrick, or maybe just for the show in general. Feel free to say hi as well. Patrick, what we have talked about so far is, you can say, we have talked about kind of making this sales-led organization, or kind of transitioning into this kind of organization. You can say some of the challenges, the time that it actually takes, and how to do it in you can say, at least in some elements. But I mean, you are the CMO, and you have a lot more responsibilities than just, you can say, what can we say, acquire and creating awareness, right? It's also about, what can we call it, the other parts of the funnel, really, activation, retention, and getting referrals, and all of those things. Do you have one focus area for a certain time period, or how does it work at Proposify?
Yeah, it's changed over the years. I've been 4+ years at Proposify, but my first year, my title was not CMO. I was a growth marketer, and so I was definitely focused on the pirate metrics: our acquisition, activation, retention, revenue, referrals, definitely. And I would try and have initiatives that balanced them, but I'd also look at the lowest hanging fruit. Like, what could we make the biggest difference, and look at the conversion rates between each of those, each stage, and say, which one can we move the largest? And that's going to make the biggest difference in revenue at the end of the day. And so when I first started, I had a paid advertising background, but I said, I don't want to focus on this. It's not making the money. What we needed, we had an SEO problem. And so, okay, that's where the focus was an acquisition initiative. That was where I felt like we can make the biggest difference, and then some funnel problems within kind of activation as well. So at that point, I wasn't really looking at referral as much. I was thinking about it, but there were only 2 people on the marketing team. We couldn't do all of those things at the same time. So I'm always thinking about each stage of the funnel, monitoring what the conversion rates are, what the success metric is for each stage, but then also looking for which one is right now going to make the biggest difference. And for an early stage startup, I think that's the only way to kind of do it. You're spread too thin. You can't actually have an ongoing thing for all of those at the same time. You can try, but your focus, at least, you could have things running maybe that are automated in the background that are at each stage, but where your new thought is going, where your new strategies and your new like time and effort goes into, I'd say focus on whichever one you think is going to make the biggest percentage change in your revenue.
Okay. And maybe can you kind of take us through how you do it, because it of course it's different for everybody. And how I kind of imagine what you're saying here is that, okay, so let's say we're looking at the traditional pirate metrics funnel, and how we see it like typically is awareness, acquisition, activation, revenue, referral, retention, revenue, referral, right?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And what you would basically do then is that you will say, okay, we have created that much awareness this week, or what it may be, and let's say that is 100,000 in reach or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And out of those people that we have reached, then in the acquisition layer here, we would say, okay, we have been able to generate, I don't know, let's say 20% or 10% of freemium users or something like that, because it was the self-onboarding kind of approach, right?
Yep.
And then you would kind of go into, okay, activation here would basically be to a paid tier, I guess.
Yeah.
And then you would look at the percentage. So let's say that 10 or maybe 20% of the people that we reached here in the awareness stage have gone into the activation flow, and then it's maybe, I don't know how many percentage, but let's say 5% or anything like that. Is that kind of like how you looked at it? And how did you choose between where was the biggest opportunity? That's really what I kind of try to identify.
Yeah, definitely. So right now we're balancing those 2 revenue models. So like the definition of activation changes, whether you're talking about sales touch or self-service on the trial. But I'll do this self-service one kind of first, because that's where we started. And yes, absolutely. We didn't have the team structure we have now, but then it was myself and a couple others focusing on, okay, we had some paid advertising, top of funnel, consistent blog posting. We had a podcast at the time, lots of brand building in the market to fuel the organic search, fuel the brand building, so that people were searching for our branded keywords and that sort of thing, that we were showing up first in Google and getting our top of funnel traffic just to a healthy level. So we do that. And then we say, okay, of our total traffic, who's doing what on the site? So then it's your site activation is what I would say. So what's our kind of conversion rate to trial? What are we doing to get people from, sure, they visited our site or they visited a blog, down to, yes, let's start this 14-day free trial. So lots of retargeting there and looking at our conversion rate on key like capture pages, and what percentage of that audience are we getting? What's our trial conversion rate was a pretty big metric that we would look at just across the board. And we would segment that out, because there's some traffic they might just be reading a blog post, but trial conversion rate of people that made sense that may actually convert to a trial. Then once they're on that 14-day free trial, it's our trial conversion or our trial to paid conversion rate, basically. So that's an onboarding process, and that's a 14 days within our application. So the channels change, the metrics change, but really it's how many people started the trial and how many people converted to that paid account at the end. So our mechanisms of doing that changed. A lot more email usage, a lot more in-app message uses, but continuing to like retarget those users, selling them more on the value of what the product can do for them, as opposed to just the high level value of getting them to know us. They already knew our brand. They already knew high level what we could do, but that was the point where we had to convince them that we provided value enough for them to pay for that service. And so looking at our average, and we would look at industry average trial conversion rates, which I think are a little bit false. Everyone's different. Don't always just believe that, but we always had this goal. It's like 10%. We really just want it. And we have been at 10% of trial conversion rates, but at some points it would fluctuate. It was a little bit lower than that. It was a little bit higher than that, but we set at least a goal for ourselves of where we wanted to get to and how much better we thought we could do. We knew how we would identify there's a big drop off in the middle of it. If we can just fix that one drop off, it'll make the conversion rate go from here to here. And all we had to do was fix that one piece. The whole funnel wasn't necessarily broken, just that one little thing. So it was slicing it into those little pieces. And for us, it was at first just coming back to the app for the first time. So you sign up for a trial on day one. Did you get to day two? Like those sorts of things. Mm-hmm. Did you get to the aha moment or like the piece in the app where it showed some value? How do we make sure that we get people to that place and increase that conversion rate and just slice the funnel into more micro little conversions? And there's a lot of gut, honestly, of thinking like this should be better. There should be more people that go from this stage to this stage than the numbers are telling us are actually doing it. And then putting a project in place to fix that.
Cool. But I still hear, like you say, of course, there's some qualitative reasoning based on it as well. But what you're really also telling me, at least, is that you actually try to define some metrics to some degree and kind of say, okay, so we get these free users, and can we keep them coming back on day two, and have they experienced our value proposition, which would probably be what you call the aha moment, right? Yeah. So you were basically kind of measuring, as I hear it, that you were measuring, okay, so one user got in, was he returning on day two? Did he experience this key feature, maybe sending out a contract? I don't know, for the first time. I don't know. And then I guess there's also other metrics to measure along the way to kind of measure engagement in total, or is it correct? Yeah,
totally. Yeah, you have the big milestones, and those are the things that show up on like the company scorecard or the things that your CEO is looking at. But then the team that's looking at everything else is you're breaking that funnel down into very much smaller pieces, and it should look like a graph where each stage is just a little bit smaller than the other, and you're looking for the like big drop offs, and then doing some logical reasoning to see like can we make this better or not, and putting those metrics behind and that tracking behind each one of those touch points. And you can do that all the way from very top of funnel, the first time they ever hit your homepage on your website, the first time they read a blog, do they get to your pricing page? Do they do that? All this path, and there's multiple paths. It gets really, really complicated. But if you can define for yourself what the most reasonable paths are, the most common paths that you feel like you can make a difference on, and then that's when the creative thinking comes out. Is like, okay, how do we make this better? How do we improve this? What projects are we actually putting in place? And determining those is almost more important than what the actual project is or what the creative idea might be. Because if you never figure out that, oh shit, we're dropping off people here really hard, then creating as many awesome pieces of content is never going to fix that funnel problem that you had. So it's always that lowest hanging fruit, but you have to dig into the data to figure that stuff out first before you can come up with the cool way to fix it.
Cool. So what I hear is that also retention kind of, again, is the foundation of growth. If you have this big drop-off point at some point of the activation, then it doesn't really make sense to just, flow a lot more new user into the funnel. If there's still this big drop-off point, you have to fix it, like with a leaky bucket, right? Yeah, you have to fix the hole before you pour more water into it, right? One thing I was kind of curious about was that you were talking about this, how you would basically go about it. So let's say, Patrick, that you now identify, okay, there's a big drop-off point here. You don't know what it is, and you say we need to look at the data. Okay, so you would look at some data. What kind of data would it be? Let's say just a hypothetical example here, that there's a drop-off point in people who kind of send out a contract, but they never return back to Proposify after that, the first contract.
Yep.
How would you go about kind of identifying what is this about?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're going to need an analytics platform in some form. So whatever's tracking app behavior, for us, we use Heap Analytics, but there's Mixpanel, there's everything else. Make sure that you have those most often customer touch points tracked. So you can just see those user behaviors. So some of them track everything, and that's great. And other ones, you have to define those events ahead of time. It's just having a solid analytics infrastructure to be able to make those decisions. And
just one question.
Yeah.
And how long does that take to implement?
Well, it's not a pitch for Heap, but then the good thing about Heap is that they basically track everything all the time. You don't have to think of it in advance. It kind of tracks all user actions, whereas some other ones you have to place those in place. And we kind of have a hybrid model right now where you also use Segment to track some things. So it's that takes a lot of time too. Absolutely. Yeah. And so we could go way into the analytics stuff, but that's kind of I think that's shared between the product team, the development team, and the marketing team, because they're building the product. You need to make sure you know that it's actually working, and then marketing can leverage that information, or your growth team, whoever's looking at this information can leverage that to take those actions. So let's say hypothetical, you do have all of that tracked in that place. You say, okay, you've created this funnel, these tracks. So they've signed up for the free trial. They came back on day 2. They sent out their first contract, and then nothing else happened after that. It was like, well, what was supposed to be the next action, or what is the most common next action for people who do come back? So for us, it's they send the contract out, and we send them email notifications to show that someone's viewed it or someone's looked at it. So are the emails broken? Maybe it's as simple as that. I love it when stuff is just broken, because it's an easy win. Like, it sucks that it was broken, but you can automatically fix it, and your number goes back to exactly where it was, or higher than before. So find out if something's broken, fix that, and then what was the next thing that you wanted them to do, and how can you create a creative way of getting them to the next step? So email wasn't working; they're not getting there. But they did log in, so maybe some in-app notification to say like, "Hey, you've sent a proposal. What's the next step that you're going to do?" In our case, we want them to see the metrics of someone viewing the proposal. So how do we get them in front of those metrics in the best way possible? You can set up a retargeting ad campaign saying just for people who sent their proposal and haven't done something else that tells them that the metrics exist. Maybe they didn't know that there were metrics or analytics tied to after you sent the proposal, and you could hyperlink that ad directly into the application to where those metrics were. So what's the next thing that you want them to do, and what mechanisms do you have at your disposal to get them to that place? And then also just check and see, is it working? Is everything functioning as you expected it to?
Yeah, it's cool. I'm kind of imagining like a big, what can you call it, machinery of some sort, and then you have all these different lamps, and then suddenly just one lamp is kind of like buzzing with a red color and kind of great sound that, oh, there's a bug somewhere, and you kind of have to figure out where it is. Is your approach different from, you can say, the people who self-serve in comparison to the people who are sales-led? I imagine that for the more enterprise segments, you have, of course, the average revenue per enterprise client is higher than just a freemium user. Are you going to call a person who, or maybe contact a person in any sort of way who has not kind of returned after sending a contract?
Yeah, absolutely. So we look at that in a couple of different ways. So the way that we look at firmographic and demographic information for the sales-led leads, but we do also look at actions based in their usage of the free trial, and both of those are combined into like a hybrid kind of score. And so there are some people that just alone based on their demographics, firmographics, that's a salesperson will want to reach out to them. Maybe they're a target account, or they just like, this looks like a great fit customer. They might do nothing in our software at that point, and that still can be okay from a sales perspective, where they can educate them via a call, via a discovery call or a demo, and walk them through that. We can't expect everyone is going to be as point and click know how to figure stuff out. Some people love to dig into the technology. Other people don't. They want to be shown it before they try it out themselves. And so that does lend itself to the sales model a little bit for those people who are like, I think this can work for us based on what marketing materials I've seen. Maybe I'm not confident of me doing it myself, but they might not be the end user anyway. They might be the leader, the C-level executive that's like, I want to buy this for my team. And I want someone to show me what it looks like for them. And so they'll walk through that. And then vice versa, we will have people that are hands in it, go into free trial, figure stuff out, and we'll take actions to identify, they're looking at this feature, which is an enterprise level feature, which makes sense for them to talk to sales because that's a feature that they'll only get on that tier of a plan anyway. And so that's another path that someone could go down, is both triggered based on their actions and what they did in the software, or triggered just based on the firm graphics and demographics.
Cool. Patrick, we are about to round off the show, and the podcast here, or the show, it's called Out of Growth. And the last question that I always ask my guests is around that topic. And I guess I kind of have an idea of what you're going to reply based on our conversation today. But imagine that you woke up one day and Proposify was suddenly out of growth, user growth. Let's call it user growth, just to kind of dive into something else than retention.
Yeah.
What would be some of the first things that you would look at, and what would be the actions that you would take?
Yeah, absolutely. You always need to have kind of a pulse on where your revenue is coming from. You might have, like I was saying, we have multiple revenue engines, and one is that self-service revenue engine. Another one is the sales-led one, which has an outbound sales aspect to it, as well as an inbound aspect to it. So not that we're super diversified in terms of, if one of those doesn't work, we've got another one. It's still going to be a problem in terms of our overall growth. Both need to be working, but you need to know where those things tap out or where risks could come in. So COVID might be another problem that comes in, and we were marketing towards event service aid companies. So people who put on large conferences, their business got totally killed in March of this year. So how do we pivot away from that and go towards other verticals? Same thing from the self-service basis. A lot of it comes from organic search, and you can only rank as high as number one in Google. You can't go any higher than one. So there's a ceiling there. That growth engine has a top point. You can't get any higher than that unless the volume of searches is also increasing. You're not just improving your ranking in Google. So you should be aware of where your revenue is coming from, when it could tap out, or the risks that are involved in that, and think about what other opportunities are available there. And the obvious one for us is expansion revenue with an existing customer bases. So we have, if new customers, for this theoretical example, stop coming in, we still have 10,000 other customers that are getting value out of our product. How can we better support them? Are there services that we could provide them that they might be willing to pay for? Are any of the companies that our customers are they expanding? Are they scaling and growing where there might make sense to bring in other members of their team into the software? Since we bill on a per seat model, having more seats for us means more revenue, and even just preventing churn and keeping retention would be a priority at that point too. So I just recommend people keep an eye and a pulse on where's the revenue coming from. Theoretically, like this example, what happens if it turns off? What happens? What would you do next? It's a good exercise to do for sure.
Wow. Cool. Very, very great reply, Patrick. Thank you.
No worries.
So, Patrick, where can people learn more about you or follow you and kind of learn more about Proposify, what you do? Maybe if you have any articles out there that people can kind of read, where can they learn more?
Absolutely. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. You can just search for Patrick Edmonds and Proposify at LinkedIn. It should be pretty easy to find. Our URL for the site is proposify.com. Take a look at that. We have tons of blog content around proposals and how to increase your close rate on your proposals, just recommendations there. And if you're just looking at for one particular piece of content in general, I would recommend you look out our State of Proposals 2020, which we dug into all the data from our system of what people are doing with their proposals, best practices, industry standards for close rates, and that sort of thing, where you can benchmark yourself to a certain degree as like our sales teams and our contracts and proposals doing what they should be doing, and get some ideas on how to make them better.
Nice. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Patrick. And just for everybody who is listening in here, you can find links to Patrick's LinkedIn and to Proposify. And I will also try to include the blog post inside the show notes as well. And then I just want to say thank you to everybody who has tuned in today. Patrick, feel free to say thanks as well, and then we'll basically be off for today.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for listening. Thank you.
Thank you.